So John, I think you deserve a big round of applause for being so steadfast in through that. I have never seen that happen. Okay, so we have, okay, I'm just going to turn it a little bit. All right. So my vision doesn't work for that or for that, so I'm going to try to do the best I can. Hi, I'm Louise Page. I'm from PLOS. And so I have the advantage of going last, so I get to build off of all the really smart things that everybody else has said. You will see some of the same slides because we all work in the same ecosystem. This is an environment that is changing almost every day, almost every week, and it is something that's kind of hard to keep up with, but it's clear that we talk to each other a lot as you see these slides. So this is, inspired by Archive, as we all talk about. Archive was founded in 1991, and there are a lot of preprint servers that have popped up. This is some of them. This is not all of them, obviously. But when you look at, and I don't know how legible that is, but when you look at the time frames for how long they've been around and how big they are, the numbers are a little startling. So yes, Archive has been around since 1991, as our SSRN. Archive is at 1.2 million, SSRN is over 600,000. The rest of them come around 2013 and sooner. A lot of them are 2016 and 2017. And the numbers are much smaller. Archive is 12. Granted, it's only been 2017. Same with Law Archive, 134. These are small numbers. BioArchive, with its 4-year head start, is at 11,000. And so these are numbers that we want to see as an advocate for preprints. We want to see these really grow, really balloon, really start seeing that a preprint is considered a first-class research object by the researcher. And so the perspective from Jessica and from Lisa about how the researcher is accepting preprints, there's a little bit of time that's necessary for that. There's behavior, there's the hearts and minds necessary for that to change. But that doesn't mean that as a publisher, we shouldn't be ready. We shouldn't start thinking about what is our role in all of this. So yes, we've all heard about ASAP Bio, we've heard about MRC, heard about Wellcome, NIH, and now CZI. And so there has been, as I said, so much change. The acceptance of preprints is growing. The need or the requirement that anybody who is funded needs to post a preprint for their work. Wellcome has said this, Gates has said this as well, that it has to be posted, it has to be published in some way. Preprints are now being considered a first-class research object. Citations around them are being developed. People are obviously using them all the time for their research. But again, the numbers are small. This is where we're ready to start jumping off. So the disruptive potential for preprints is huge. As a publisher, as people who work with journals, we have to think about how is this going to affect us? Now at PLOS, we have as much of a weight on our publishing program as we do on our advocacy and our author program, meaning we care a lot about how the researchers work, how they function, whether or not we are helping them get to their end goal. So preprints does represent that nice little mashup that will accelerate research communication. In the case of BioArchive, a preprint goes online within 24 hours. They allow the possibility of credit before journal publication. So therefore, everybody who has published early in preprints, that can be considered part of their work product when they go out for grants and when they go for tenure. To combat publication bias, that there's all this information that's available early, people can see it early, and then to change the dynamic of assessment. And so assessment right now is done behind closed doors, it's done as peer review, it's done by us as publishers, but what happens when it's more in the wild? What happens when it's done by the community? What happens when some of this is done through crowdsourcing? What does that do to the publication record? So PLOS's perspective on preprints has always been very positive, very open. We have always supported preprints. We always tell our authors that please post as a preprint, particularly for time-sensitive information. So when the Zika outbreak came out last year, and WHO said that this stuff needs to get published quickly. When we received papers, we told those authors, put it on BioArchive. Get it out there first. We'll still consider it for peer review, but get it out there. And so that was as a means to accelerate the dissemination of the science. And we also have always said that a publication of a preprint will not preclude you from being published in the PLOS journal. We've also entered into several levels of partnerships with BioArchive. And so we have that direct submission, as I mentioned, from NTDs on Zika papers, and we were pushing them towards BioArchive. We also accept preprints from BioArchive, and we have over 100 now. So John was saying that number was 600 or 700. We've actually received 100 since September, and that's been really, it's been productive. It's been extremely productive. Now, what we've also done is that we actually have a little cadre of editors on our genetics journal who actually do this as a full-time job, is go through the preprint servers. They actually check to see what's being published. They actually see what's being posted, what they like, and they actually go and solicit those authors to submit those papers to PLOS Genetics. And that is it's a bit of a time-consuming practice, I will admit, but it has changed in some ways the marketplace for the author, because the author to date has gone from one publisher to another. They've taken their sad little paper or their sad little rejection, and they keep going from place to place to place, and they hope that they get published within a reasonable period of time. But now imagine you go up as a preprint, you're up within hours, and then somebody comes to you and says, wouldn't you like to submit to our journal? It's not a guarantee that they're going to get published, but there's that pre-screening, if you will, that's getting done. So what other roles can a publisher play in this new ecosystem? One that's changing every day, one where there are players that we haven't heard of, like CZI, didn't exist last year, or at least the beginning of last year. So, what happens when this is changing all the time? So one of the things we do know about is that there's a waiting game. This is something that the authors complain about. They look to see what is our time to publication? What is our time to first decision? They pore over these numbers. We pore over these numbers. We care a great deal about this. How much are we doing about our automation, about our workflows, about our mechanics in order to responsibly publish faster, make decisions faster? And so this is something where we all want to make a change. So when you think about what we do, as publishers, it's pretty simple, right? Like baseball, you catch a ball, you hit a ball. But we accept submissions. We review them for publication suitability. We then post them. We set and adhere to publishing standards. We adopt content standards. We adopt technical standards in order to ease interoperability. We operate at scale, okay? And this is something that's really important. We operate with thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of manuscripts. And so we know what it means to work at scale. And we've had decades and centuries, in some cases, of experience doing this. And what do we all do? We compete for those authors. We compete for their papers. We compete for the reviewers in order to review all this content. And then we also obviously compete for the eyeballs of those readers. So what I want to suggest is that there is a publisher role that could take into account all of these important things that we do as part of our daily job. And so what we do is that we take in the submissions. We could develop a more standard interface. So in order to get preprints through, sometimes that interface is pretty simple. They just want a PDF. And there isn't much you can do with a PDF. As publishers, when we accept an article for submission, it's usually more than a PDF. We usually have more metadata, we have more information. In the case of PLOS, we ask for source data. So this is something that we could then leverage for reuse for the preprint. The preprint doesn't have to be a flat PDF. You don't have to reverse engineer that PDF into a full text article. So there are lots of options with that submission interface that we could envision together. And then when it goes through that screening process, this is something we all do. So one of the things that we found with PLOS One and with our other 6 journals is that we do the same screening, review, plagiarism checking for all of our content. In the case of PLOS One, we do it very, very quickly. We do a lot of it within the first week that we actually have it in-house. Our other journals that are more selective, that process will happen throughout their lifespan, sometimes even after first decision. And so what happens when you rethink that, the mechanics of how you're doing your screening, and you move them forward, and you make that happen within the first week, so that that content that you receive as a publisher could be posted as a preprint at BioArchive, on another preprint server, depending on your field of study. In the case of PLOS, we have a wide range of content. The vast majority is biomedical. However, we do publish in law, we publish in economics, we publish in finance. So we need to think about the grand scheme of where all this content is going to go in a preprint world. And one of the sessions tomorrow that John was mentioning is going to be talking more about these transfers and these API transfers, because the technology interoperability world has changed dramatically. And so the ability to move manuscripts from place to place, content from place to place, is a lot easier through APIs and through web services. And so when those get standardized between the systems, and again, as we work towards a more standardized interface for what is an acceptable submission, then you can move from system to system. And from an author experience, being able to go in once and then be able to say, okay, I'm going to be a preprint and I would like to be considered for PLOS. And if PLOS says, thank you very much, no, then you can, that preprint still exists, and you could turn that around and then go to another publisher. Again, with that same article, again with those transfers. And so from an author experience, it could really be much more positive for them. They will, and they also have the marketplace of BioArchive that they're getting wooed. So all of this is in an effort to change the dynamic of the author, of the publishing, with the new entry called a preprint. So when we think about what we do as a publisher in our role, and if we attach them into preprints, every single of the things that we do are things that we could use to leverage a more adoptable environment for preprints, to make sure that as a research object, they are getting the same kinds of attention, dissemination, visibility as a regular research article gets. And so that we are playing a role in that adoption, in that education, and making sure that they're more widespread. So from the PLOS perspective, we see preprints as open science in play. You know, it is a really good example of how the experience for the author, for the publisher also, could be enhanced. It could be faster, it could be more efficient, it could be cheaper because time is money, and it could be modern. A lot of technologies these days are 20 years old. And so how do we leverage the new technologies, the new open source technologies, especially ones that Chan Zuckerberg and BioArchive might develop, how do we leverage all of that so that it can benefit all of us, so we all rise up? Transparent. The cost of publishing is still a very big open issue. You know, the way that when you start publishing a preprint, when you start pushing that much into the first 24 hours of the life of an article, and how much we do there, how much does that cost? How much does that cost compared to the months or years that an article rolls around our systems looking for a publication? So breaking down the APC, breaking down the cost of publishing is something that PLOS really wants to do. And also, of course, extending peer review, open peer review, and how that's done. And assessment as it pertains to the lifetime of the work. It isn't just when it gets assessed during the peer review process. It gets assessed throughout its creation and its growth. The recognition for the author is really important. They need this for their careers. They need this for the incentives that drive them to publish. And so giving them credit for this research object is incredibly valuable. Reproducible. John was talking about open data, about protocols. This is something that we do for journals. Why aren't we doing it? Of course we should be doing it for preprints as well. Making that data available so that people can reproduce the science, that they can go through protocols, use open protocols in order to be able to see exactly the steps that were taken for that particular research study. And collaborative. One of the things that is very clear is that authors don't work alone. they like to work with their peers. They care what their peers think about them. And so this form of interoperability, this kind of community, the commenting that they might see on BioArchive, this kind of ecosystem and conversation is something that Preprints is really going to take to a new level. So thank you very much.